Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I believe this is our fourth, soon to be fifth seat at the table. My name is Molly Gray, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vermont's 82nd Lieutenant Governor. We'll give everyone just a moment to get logged in, to get comfortable, and then we'll get started. Great. And again, welcome to everyone joining us. So it looks like we've got everyone logged in. My name is Molly Gray. I'm very, very pleased to host a bi-weekly seat at the table event, elevating the voices of Vermonters in Montpelier on some of the most critical issues facing our state. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who've joined us every other week, welcome back. Today's focus is workforce development. Workforce development and the next generation is what we've entitled today's event. And I'd like to, before introducing our speakers, just frame this issue for a moment. I think it comes as no surprise, and we all very well know that Vermont faces a demographic crisis. We are one of the oldest states in the country. We struggle to recruit and retain employees across sectors, across professions, you name it, we have a workforce recruitment and retention challenge. At the same time, we also have a generation that is plagued with student loan debt and is struggling to make it work here in Vermont. So today's panel is really focused on amplifying just some of, and I want to underscore some of, because we have so many folks joining us today who are working in different workforce development fields across the state, be it in CTEs or pathway programs, or from our state colleges. We also have legislators and administration officials here today, and I hope we have an opportunity to hear from all of you. But today's panel is really about amplifying some of the work that's happening. We're also going to talk about some of the data in the job market, in Vermont's job market today, and to talk about some of the programs that have found some success. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. First, I welcome everyone. If you're from a technical center or you're working in workforce development, please introduce yourself in the chat. Share your name, share where you're zooming in from. I also want to note that today's event is recorded and will be available on YouTube later for sharing. And that we will have plenty of time for questions during the second half of our gathering today. So please feel welcome to put your question in the chat, and I'll prompt you to do so as well later. Now I'd like to introduce our incredible lineup of speakers. We have Carolyn Weir, who's Executive Director of the J. Warren and Lewis McClure Foundation. Joyce Judy, the President of the Community College of Vermont. Eileen Elluzi, Director at the North Country Career Center. Ken Cadow, Director of Career and Workforce Pathways at Randolph Union High School. Adam Grenald, Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Each of these incredible panelists bring a different perspective and have done incredible work in this field. So without further ado, I'm going to kick things right off with the first question to Carolyn. I think, Carolyn, so much of what we know about workforce development, the challenges, comes from the data. And you've done an incredible job, the McClure Foundation's done an incredible job of putting together important information about the jobs exist, but also about some of the needs that we have. So I'd like to begin with you today. If you could highlight some of the data and trends here in Vermont, that'd be great.
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Lieutenant Governor. And I'm just so glad to join today's discussion about career pathways. It's an issue that I think is at the forefront of so many Vermonters' minds this past year. And as you said, it's no surprise why. Last June, Vermont ranked second in the nation for the percentage of jobs lost due to the pandemic. And even with more Vermonters coming back to work, the pandemic continues to take a toll, right? Jobs in the food service and accommodation industry, for example, are still down over 30%. And while Vermont's official unemployment rate has receded to a little over 3% from its peak back in April, near 15%, we know that official rate undercounts folks out of the labor force who just aren't looking for work right now because of family health considerations or lack of childcare. Over 28,000 fewer Vermonters are working now as compared to pre-pandemic. So it's against that backdrop of folks out of work or feeling less safe in their work, and young people graduating high school into an environment of just such uncertainty that we considered how we, as a workforce development funder, could help connect Vermonters to careers. So 2 of the ways we responded were very much designed to offer hope and simplicity, 2 things I think are sorely needed in a time like this. So first, you mentioned, with the Vermont Department of Labor, we released an updated list of Vermont's most promising jobs. Each job on the list is expected to pay at least $22 an hour median wage, have at least 220 job openings in the coming years. And there's just a huge diversity of jobs on this list. They range from licensed practical nurses to computer support specialists and software developers to electricians to graphic designers, you name it. And as you can probably hear just from that short list, many of Vermont's promising jobs can be obtained with short-term career training programs, but we know it can be overwhelming, and I think understandably so, for Vermonters to navigate the hundreds of career training programs that are available across the state. So with the help of workforce development leaders alongside the list of promising jobs, we also identified 7 short-term career training programs that we consider best bets for landing a promising Vermont job quickly. We partnered with the Vermont Community Foundation to make those programs even more affordable for Vermonters this year. And CCV aligned some of those career training programs with its early college program for the Vermont high school class of 2022. So our second response, with encouragement from our foundation president, Barbara Benedict, we offered a graduation gift to all members of the Vermont high school class of 2020 of 1 free course of their choosing at CCV last fall. We were just seeing signs of mass deferments in post-secondary continuation of that class because of the pandemic, and wanted to offer these young people an easy way to continue their learning. And then behind the scenes, support a relational handoff from the high school-based counselors they were working with to the counselors and advisors at the college level who could help students chart next steps in terms of both education and work. And this was especially important to us because I think, as we all know, Vermont has long had a relatively low post-secondary continuation rate, especially among low-income students, right? In a typical year, as few as 37% of Vermont's low-income high school grads pursue college after graduation, which is among the lowest rate in New England. And the pandemic threatened to depress that continuation rate even further. So by September, over 600 students from the class of 2020 had enrolled in their free course. 50% of those identified as first in family to pursue college. And that's double the typical size of this cohort at CCV at a time when new enrollment at community colleges nationally was plummeting. And through the initiative, we saw a really high percentage of students connecting with their advisors to talk about their education and career interests and actually develop a plan. So taking a step back, reflecting on this past year, and then we were privileged as a foundation to offer some hope in a time of disruption, both through investments that were really targeted at critical occupations and some other investments that just broadly incented learning of all kinds. We're left with a sense of urgency for Vermont to continue inspiring hope. Hope about the range of promising jobs that do exist and the affordability of the education and training that leads to them. In some cases, that might mean improving the ways we help Vermonters learn about existing jobs, programs, supports. In other cases, inspiring that kind of hope may require Vermont thinking differently about how college and career training is supported, structured, accessed. It's clear to us coming off of this past year that when college and career training is guaranteed to be very affordable, when the public perceives that it's easy to access, they enroll. So I hope we can collectively build on that in ways that make Vermont a more equitable state and that deepen our resilience and the resilience of our workforce in the face of economic, health, natural disasters of the future. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Lieutenant Governor, and look forward to the rest of the conversation today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing. I love the hope and simplicity. And I think that there's a lot that you shared that's sort of a jumping off point for further conversation. I am going to come back to you about where do you think we should go from here? I did want to ask though, for everyone tuning in today, where can we go or where can listeners go for information on the jobs that are available? Where is the McClure Foundation report, which has all this great information?
It's mcclurevt.org/pathways, and I'll drop it in the chat.
Wonderful. And with that, I'd like to now introduce Joyce Judy from CCV to talk about what we've learned over what CCV's learned over the last year, both from this partnership with the McClure Foundation, but also just different trends that we're seeing in workforce development and offering some of the training that's necessary. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, and it's I'm so pleased to be able to share this seat at your table to really talk about some of the challenges and the lessons that we've learned during the past year. And I just want to acknowledge our close partnership with the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation because they have been a partner with us for a long time and have really helped provide some philanthropic support for us to try different kinds of programs and to see what sticks. And so, you know, I want to follow up on what Carolyn just said in terms of the high school graduation gift. And I want to just give you one anecdote from a student and how this gift made such a difference, because a few people have said, well, giving a person one course, what does that do? Let me share an example of a student who, whoops, sorry about that. Part of my IT support was just disappeared. But a student who shared her story, she was a foster child and she turned 18 when she was in high school. So she finished her senior year. And as we all know, when you turn 18 and you're in the foster system, oftentimes it's that you drop off the cliff and you have no longer have support. She couch surfed and finished her senior year. Then she was working, so she graduated. She was working and she got laid off. But her boss liked her so much, and she felt so bad about laying her off. She said to her when she laid her off, I'm taking courses at CCV. You should go and talk with someone at CCV. And so she did, and she was late to the game, but because of the McClure Foundation gift, she was able to get a free course to start with. And she knew nothing about financial aid. She knew nothing about how to fill out any of these forms. And you can imagine how complicated it is when you also are a foster kid. But she started at CCV with that one course. It helped her get her toe in the water. And now she's a full-time student. So one course, we never know what that will do in terms of planting the seed. So kudos to the McClure Foundation for stepping up and helping with this. You know, I think Lieutenant Governor and Carolyn, both of you have mentioned that, you know, Vermont enjoys a very high school graduation rate, and kudos to us. But we struggle with people continuing their education beyond high school. And as we know, the jobs that are being created require skills well beyond the high school level. And again, I'm not saying that everyone has to do college. You can go in the military, apprenticeships, there's all kinds of opportunities. But I think that the issue is continuing your education beyond high school. And so I think one of the silver linings with the pandemic was that we were able to do 2 different programs where we were able to remove cost as a barrier. And, you know, while I don't think that cost is the only reason that Vermont has a very low college going rate, we can't ignore that it is a significant factor. So the two programs where we were able to remove finances as the barrier was the program that Carolyn referred to, the J. Warren and Lois McClure graduation gift. And normally CCV sees about 300 recent high school graduates enrolling in the fall. This year we saw 600. Now, you know, yes, it's a different environment. We were in COVID, people had different plans. but that doubling is significant. And so when you removed cost as a barrier, all of a sudden we saw an uptick. So now that is an N of 1. And so, we'd like to try it again, but you can't ignore that factor. The second program I want to just mention is the program where we used CRF funds, the legislature appropriated funds to support any adult whose family or livelihood had been impacted by COVID. And as we know, I would challenge anyone to find anybody in Vermont that hasn't been impacted by COVID. And this money provided support for adults to take college courses. And we had over 500 students enroll in that program over the course of a weekend, because this all came available in the middle of October, and classes, CCV classes that they could enroll in started in early November. And when we went back and did a survey of these students, we found that by far, the vast majority of them said that the reason that they hadn't engaged in college before, because of cost. So as we think about, some of the barriers to training and education so that Vermonters are prepared for the very jobs that the McClure Foundation has identified in their career work, we have to think about the cost of college, because I will leave you with CCV is one of the most expensive community colleges in the country. And at nearly $1,000 a course, that is a barrier for so many people, because it's not whether they're going to go to CCV or UVM or Castleton, it's whether they're going to go to CCV or no place. So, there's lots of good things that are happening, but we also have a number of challenges in Vermont, and I will just turn it back to you.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing a wonderful success story from the last year. I think the big question is, where do we go from here? I know, and if there are members of the legislature on, I know that there's more relief funding coming with a CCV component. I think we have a bill that will be on the floor tomorrow, in fact. I do want to move now to a different piece of the workforce development puzzle, and that's our CTEs around the state. I know we have a lot of representatives here. If you want to raise your hand, I'd love to just give you a shout out for all your incredible work. I'm pleased next to introduce Eileen Elluzi from the North Country Career Center, one of many career and technical centers across the state, to talk about what's happening there. As just one example of the work of our career and technical centers to help our high school graduates enter the good paying jobs that exist in our communities right now. And I think it's important to recognize that so often there's this myth, right, that there aren't good paying jobs in Vermont. But what we know very well, is that is an absolute fallacy. And it's more about how to train the next generation. So Eileen, thank you so much for joining us from Newport, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor Gray. And I can't agree more with what Carolyn and Joyce have already said. We've all been doing this for a long time, and we say a lot of the same things. It's hard for me to keep within 5 minutes, so I did prepare remarks. But before I go into those, I want to tell a little story too, because we're talking about, the future of our workforce development, our high school students now, and where do they go? And I can, all of the directors can tell stories about where their students go, but it hit me recently. I went for my first COVID vaccine, and I'm waiting in the pharmacy, and the pharmacy tech yells, "Mrs. Illuzzi, you're up next." And I looked at her, I said, you graduated years ago. You don't have to call me Mrs. Illuzzi anymore. And I go, and the pharmacist who's there, who gave me my shot, was also a Career Center graduate. And I started thinking about it, and I thought about, I had to call the plumber this year to come in to fix something, and he had gone to the Career Center. So often I run into our workforce in my day-to-day life, and either they say, "Oh, I was at the Career Center," or "Oh, my son was at the Career Center," or "Oh, my daughter's going to the Career Center." So it's a real starting point for a lot of career pathways. And now with Perkins funding, being able to do some middle school outreach. We're even getting in earlier for that foundation. So with that said, I want to give a little background on not just my programs, but all the CTE programs around the state, because they're also wonderful. So today's career and technical education programs, or CTE, prepare youth and adults for high wage, high skill, and high demand careers in established and emerging industries. They are cutting edge, academically rigorous, and relevant to both the students' interests and the workforce development needs of Vermont. There are 17 regional technical centers in Vermont that offer programs such as health sciences, dental assisting, natural resources, animal science, welding, automotive technology, engineering, and mechatronics. Our programs embed academic content into their curriculum so that students can earn credit in course subjects while they are also learning career skills in their chosen field. The curriculum supports students in personalized learning plans, proficiency-based graduation requirements, and in preparation for post-secondary education and training. They also teach leadership skills and the importance of community service through career and technical student organizations, or CTSOs. Vermont's CTE programs offer a range of options to our students, including the opportunity to earn industry-recognized credentials, college credits through the Vermont Fast Forward Dual Enrollment Initiative, articulation agreements with many colleges, and paid and unpaid work-based learning positions. Some examples are, at the North Country Career Center, students in the Health Sciences program can earn up to 12 college credits, as well as receiving their licensed nursing assistant certification. We offer 11 different dual enrollment classes at North Country Career Center. Some of the larger centers have the option of offering even more. For example, the Center for Technology in Essex offers 16 different dual enrollment courses. 4 of those courses, 2 math and 2 science, are in core subjects and will give students not only their high school graduation requirements, but also some college requirements for going on. Students at Central Vermont Career Center and Randolph Technical Center can complete the first year of a registered apprenticeship in either electrical or plumbing. Construction trades students in all of our programs that participate can earn a certification from NCCER, which is a nationally recognized construction certification. All students in our centers are now tested for reading and math scores using the ACT Work Keys test. And if they score well enough, they will then receive the National Career Readiness Certification from ACT. CTE students, like all students in Vermont, have varying interests, needs, and abilities. While some students choose to enter the workforce after graduation, most pursue some sort of education or training, and many go on to 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges. Some go to nursing school and graduate programs, other to the military. Just as Joyce was saying, gone are the days of college or career. We don't have those tracks anymore. Today's students need further post-secondary training, whether that is college or technical school, apprenticeships, if they really want to be successful in today's careers. But there are some students who enter directly into the workforce, and they're ready to start their careers thanks to their training with CTE. But while they're doing their job, they often take other courses in adult technical education or through the continuing education programs at the Vermont State Colleges, so they can earn more industry recognized credentials and really excel in their careers. You've probably heard about students at CTE centers doing hands-on learning. This doesn't mean that students don't need to study, or they're not as smart as college prep kids. It means that they are learning applied academics, and applied academics are academics that you apply to real world situations through problem solving, through mastery and demonstration of technical skills. The programs that are offered vary based on regional needs. We do extensive now local needs analysis, so we can see what programs are needed. That's one of the new requirements of Perkins 5. And then we offer those programs to our students. All programs have program advisory committees. We have representatives from business and industry for each of the programs that help shape the curriculum so students are learning current industry standards in their technical field. CTE is truly a partnership between education and industry and always has been. And for that reason, it really is the foundation of our workforce education and training system.
Thank you, Eileen. It's incredible to hear about the applied academics, excuse me. I also love what you said about gone are the days of college or career. And I'd love to be able to come back to you when we have our sort of follow-up question about where we go from here, and really trying to change some of the questions that we have around, do you go to college or don't you, right? The things that I think a generation now in their 30s with a lot of student loan debt wish that they had contemplated in a different way years ago. I also want to give a shout out to the Riverbend Career and Technical Center of Oxbow High School, where I grew up. I know that there are folks here from that CTE as well. And I see Jason and others from around the state. So thank you for joining us. I next want to move into what I see and hope is sort of a complement to our CTEs, which is the Pathways programs. I'd like to introduce Ken Cadow from the Randolph Union High School, who is the Director of Careers and Workforce Pathways. And then we'll go to Adam Grenald from the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I think these are some really interesting examples of students engaging with communities and finding employers locally. So Ken, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear more about your important work.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Gray. So an important question for people who help kids to prepare for their future is, how do students come to discover what they do best and what they want to do with their lives? A solid sense of what's out there for our kids can help them decide how to prioritize their own learning. And so we start, Vermont has a work-based learning program through most of the high schools, and that reaches down into the 7th and 8th grade as well. We try to incorporate, as much as possible, graduation standards directly into these programs so that they're available to all of our students. Very often, work-based learning programs are only available to kids who are either, it's our last-ditch effort to keep them in school, or they've exhausted a lot of the academics. So what we try to do here is connect the academics with the working world. And we start that pretty intensively in 9th and 10th grade. To this end, Randolph Union High School has developed what we call the deployed classroom model, in which case, like I said, the core content area graduation standards, math, science, social studies, and English, can be met and earned through experiences that align those standards directly to the applications in the working world. So I've got a couple examples of this. One is the introduction to manufacturing, which introduces kids to careers in manufacturing, machining, and engineering, and business. And we take 36 field trips over the course of this. It's fit right into the student's schedule. The kids start out, they go to human resources, they get a talking to about, they learn that, yeah, there's, not only is there a school handbook, but there's also usually a work, a handbook, an employee handbook. So that's not something we made up. This is something that they may see for the rest of their lives. They go over safety, and then we get into more basics, how to vet an idea that might be manufactured through, for feasibility, is going to be worth manufacturing. They learn how to prototype, satisfy a customer, and work with the design. There's a lot of communication in there. They learn about mold making, the math behind mold making, the how the numbers that they might be using in math actually apply in the machining world. Computer numeric controlled machining, CNC machining. They learn about scientific injection molding and the scientific process as it applies to manufacturing. quality assurance complete with data analysis, and supply chain management. So it's a great big exposure through a series of field trips, mostly to GW Plastics, but also to LED Dynamics, Vermont Technical College, and a couple other manufacturers that we may be able to pick up along the way. And what's great about this is it is a sustained exposure for our students to the working world, where they see not only how their content areas relate to a job, but also they see the camaraderie that can develop in the workplace. The workplace becomes less scary, and because they might go 30 times to GW Plastics, which in fact they do, that they see interactions between the same two people over the course of time, and I think that's comforting. Another important thing about having this available to 9th and 10th graders is it's a big decision a 10th grader might make, whether they want to go to a career tech ed or continue with high school. And this might help them inform better. Our tech center here offers an advanced manufacturing program. And a lot of our students who go through the introduction to manufacturing make that choice, and they make it in a really informed way. So I have a couple pictures of kids. So Hazel, I'm ready for the first one. Yeah, these are students who were at GW Plastics, and they'd completed 4 weeks of studying mold making. And their final exam for that unit was to take apart a mold and have to clean it and put it back together in an hour and a half. And they couldn't do that if they didn't understand how it worked. So it's fun, it's hands-on, it's got a lot of, and then also you can see in the back there, because each one of these molds is around a $20,000 piece of equipment, they're working side by side with the folks that work at GW Plastics. And the pressure's on, but it's also fun and very, again, it's working world, real application. And then I've got another slide, and these students had been studying blueprints. They were given, and there's a heck of a lot going on with blueprints, and what they needed to do was they were given 2 parts and a blueprint, and they had to say which part was out of spec. And then, I don't know, that's about what I want to share. Thanks, Hazel. We'll be ready for, slide 3 in a second. Our other deployed classroom that I wanted to talk about was an introduction to water management, in which students are exposed to water as it relates, to construction, watershed, water flow, highway maintenance, landscaping, and civil engineering. And these students, again, had been studying topographic maps, and we visited the Rochester fish hatchery. And what was happening here was post-Irene, they needed to replace the whole, the facility had to really be rebuilt. And they were looking at the topographic maps and understanding, and taking a walk with the guy, really as the place was about to be rebuilt, understanding how scale and a lot of what they study in math and science comes into play in the working world. And our feeling is we've talked a lot. Everyone's mentioned how we graduate a lot of kids who then go on and falter post-secondary. And I think that students are a lot more likely to tough out what it takes to get into a career if they know that that career speaks to them, and exposing them in a really meaningful way to the careers early on is so vital. So that's pretty much what I have to share here.
Thank you, Ken.
My pleasure.
think
Thank
it's
you.
terrific. I love what you said about the deployed classroom. And my goodness, I think if I were in high school and that was an option, I would take advantage of that. And I think a lot of good examples of 21st century employers in the state and also 21st century jobs and the importance of building those pathways early. I'd next like to turn to Adam Grinold, the Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development and Credit Corporation, to talk about some of the interesting pipeline and pathway work that you're doing in Windham County. And before I do that, if you have questions, please feel free to start putting those into the chat. We're going to do a quick round with everyone, and then we'll turn to questions. We look forward to bringing more voices into the conversation. So Adam, over to you and welcome.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. It's great to be able to participate here today. Before I begin, I do want to thank and recognize Ken for his early input into our program as we really figured out what we were going to be doing and his continued partnership. So thanks, Ken. You know, the BDCC is one of the RDCs, may not be a natural partner in economic development. So actually this started as one of our strategic ways in which to lower the median age of our region. Windham County is one of the oldest counties in an old state. So how do we do that? We use our YP group. We have an internship program. And then this, our P3, which is the Pipelines and Pathways program. So as this modern economic development organization, we try to understand what are all the different components to our economy. We get some really positive results for students and employers out of this, but really it started as lowering that median age. So the P3 program emerged almost 5 years ago we were convening our workforce group under the auspices of the WIB, and we'd bring our employers and our educators together and other interested parties. And what we found really was that was lacking energy and really effective outcomes. So we split those two apart. And as soon as we did that, we realized that they had been having trouble communicating. And you know, it was natural, right? They have different cultures and backgrounds. They spoke a different language, and they actually had different goals. So once we were able to sort of set that table in a neutral manner, we began to identify common goals and common language. And we brought those folks back together with us sort of remaining in the middle and launched a program. So we said, all right, what are we going to do? We're going to do field trips. After speaking to Ken, this is great. And so we went out, we raised some money from some school buses. We put kids on them, we sent them into the employers, and it didn't go well. So what do? We say we need a licensed, experienced educator. So we have to ensure that this person has the understanding of how to make the connection, to continue that translation and prepare the students for those experiences. So we went out and started to identify what this program would look like, what its value proposition would be to employers, what it would be to the education system. We forged really strong relationships with superintendents, with school boards, with principals, counselors, and of course, the classroom educators. And through that, we were able to develop a program. And we went out and we raised funds with a critical initial investment from the McClure Foundation, which allowed us to step out into a space that really we had no business being in until we started this program. And through those relationships, which are so critical, I've spent a chunk of my time talking about the relationships, because if other communities are going to do this, I highly recommend that that's the starting point for everything, is establishing those relationships. So we now have our director. She's starting in her 3rd year here, Christy Beatty, heading up the P3 program. And importantly, this is for all kids. So this is for those who are college bound, those are for job bound, kids who are struggling, and kids who just simply have no plan or no path. We want to improve the post-secondary outcomes. Windham County has one of the lowest four-year credentialing after 4 years of graduating high school in the state. So we partner with schools, and it's tricky. So unlike hope and simplicity, we have hope and complexity. So we now have to show how we're going to do this. So Christy, in partnership with a lot of the educators, has developed 16 modules, and this is an actionable process that has actually gotten us a lot of traction with the other educators, because they can now see how they can introduce this across the core curriculum, not just in one specific class. Really important. This is not just for those other kids. This is for all students throughout their high school career, ensuring that we're exposing those students to those skills in training and experience throughout their high school career. So as freshmen, they look at how to write a resume. As sophomores, they're doing the Sophomore Summit. In their junior and senior years, they're looking at career spotlights and flexible pathways. In southeastern Vermont, household incomes are lower than the rest of the state average. We have child poverty, significant, especially in our hubs of 50%. We have, of course, opioid crisis is disabling the family's ability to nurture children and teenagers in those ever critical years. So P3 is designed to mitigate that economic stress and lack of opportunity for all students and ensure they get that experience and opportunity in the schools and workforce. So I'll pause there and hope for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I think it's really important, and I want to thank you again for being able to join today, to bring employers, to bring our business community, to bring the Chamber of Commerce, those are sort of on the other end, the hiring end, to the table. And I think it's just really exciting what you've started in Windham County. So with that, I want to come back to our panelists, because we like to have a, where do we go from here? We're not just going to talk about the problems. We're also going to put forward some solutions, be it funding, being policy. To the policymakers that are here today, I want to hear as well. So with that, I'd like to do sort of 1 minute each. Carolyn, I'm going to start with you. Where do we go from here? And then I want to turn to questions. If you do have questions, please feel welcome to put them in the chat. Carolyn, where do we go? Where do we make strategic investments moving forward?
I think I'd first just underscore everything that's being done that we've heard today in K-12 and CTE to introduce learners to the world of work and offer low-risk opportunities to explore their interests. But I think I want to use my 1 minute to come back to continuation and cost. You know, during and after the pandemic, Vermonters really deserve to be inspired by the value and accessibility of education and training that leads to good jobs. And there are a lot of one-time affordability investments being considered by the legislature right now that offer free courses, that incent training connected to critical occupations. And that's a fantastic start, and I want to celebrate it. And if it's not too much, asking too much, I also don't want to lose sight of the need to really transform public perception of affordability and ease of access for the long term. It's hard for me to envision a successful path forward in that work that doesn't include systemic investments in the institutions where students who are least likely to continue are most likely to go, the types of investments that really drive down the cost of tuition. The fact that Joyce said CCV tuition is among the highest in the country limits how much we can influence the public perception of affordability. So it's a conversation I hope deepens in the coming years.
Absolutely. A plan with, I believe, 1.9 trillion and several billions coming to Vermont. There's a lot of strategic opportunities, so that's important. Joyce, over to you.
I want to switch the conversation just a little bit from traditional age students to adults. And my pitch is, I think we need to figure out more learn while you earn possibilities, because so many of our adults can't stop their work in order to go to school. So how do we think about those in combination? So learn while you earn programs, apprenticeships are a great example. But the second thing is, I think we have to forge more partnerships between public and private and businesses. And let me give you a quick example. We have a wonderful program that we have developed with Central Vermont Medical Center, and it's a partnership between Central Vermont Medical Center, CCV, and Vermont Technical College. And it's really to build the nursing, to address the nursing shortage. And what it does is Central Vermont Medical Center identifies employees who aspire to be nurses. And they actually have made a huge financial commitment. They give people time off for work. We offer the courses at the location. It's made as easy as we can. We use some apprenticeship money to help fund their coursework. So they do about their first 24 credits with CCV, and then they transfer into the nursing program directly at Vermont Tech, and Vermont Tech and CCV are both offering those courses on ground. So we are bringing all of our resources to the table, and these people are still working. Many of them are LNAs who aspire to be LPNs. So I think we have to think about creative solutions, but we all have to bring our resources to the table and figure out how we can support more adults who aspire to have different jobs, but don't have the time or the money to shift gears and invest in themselves. And so we have to make it as easy as we can and as supportive as we can to invest in themselves.
Thank you, Joyce. I want to next go up to Newport to the North Country Career Center and Eileen. Eileen, what do you see as the most important strategic investments we can make now from a CTE perspective, or one CTE perspective?
Well, one CTE perspective, my colleagues will all say, we really have to address the funding for secondary CTE programs, because in many areas there's a disincentive for sending high schools to tuition students to a CTE center because it comes right off the top of their budget. But I also want to talk a little bit about what Joyce just said about everyone bringing something to the table and this collaborative kind of spirit. I think it's really important that we really identify the whole workforce education system and stop looking at just little parts. You know, we'll give this amount of money to CCV and that amount of money to the career centers, but to really look at this whole system. And as part of that system, I would also put in a little pitch for adult technical education, because I think that is a partner that can be crucial in managing all of the collaborative training programs and relationships.
Thank you. And I couldn't agree more. Even in putting together this panel, we wanted to bring some of the different voices, but there are so many voices. And I think if there's an opportunity to look at the system and all the different tools in the workforce development toolkit here in Vermont, we could be a lot stronger, better, more unified moving forward. Eileen, we just heard from you. Ken, over to you.
Thank you. I think sort of two things. One, just from an education perspective, I think we have a pretty ad hoc approach to literacy in our state, and I think we can do better without relinquishing the sense of local control. There's too little hope of advancement in a career without solid literacy skills, and I know there was just a bill that didn't quite make it, well, one of them, at the state level, and it's just vital that I think great teachers are performance artists, and they will take even something that's prepackaged and make it beautiful in their own way. So I think one thing is to really focus on our literacy, and the other is to give our teachers a little more permission. Right now, so many of our teachers feel a lot of fidelity to our graduation standards, and that has sort of one-offed the fidelity to our students. And really making those standards connect to the students and their sense of the future is, I think, more important than the fidelity to the standards themselves. And in all of our records keeping and things like that, we've lost that. So in the reporting out, I think a sense of permission to show what we know differently will open up an opportunity to expose our kids to a whole lot more careers.
Thank you, Ken. And I think what we've heard from students is the students are struggling, and that all of you who have been on the front lines over the last year, you know that. And there's a lot of questions about what comes next and being adaptive to a future that's going to look a little different, right? New opportunities, new challenges, certainly. Adam, a last word from you, and then I see some questions posed in the chat, and we'll move to those.
Sure, yeah, thank you. I think a way in which, so P3, Pipelines Pathways Program, is also public-private partnership, right? Probably more widely known. And I really do believe that that is a key to future success across the state. So challenging regions to come together to identify what their solutions are, what their programs will look like, place some funding out there that allows regions to identify match to leverage that, to further perhaps the federal investment coming in now that says go out and establish a program that works for you, for your employers, for your community, your school. Make sure you have those relationships that will allow this to work and thrive. If this is pushed down from top down, I don't think it's going to work. It needs to be organic, grown from within. You have talented, smart people across the state who all believe in the goal and the purpose of connecting Vermonters to their local workplace. Not yet talked about today is now with remote work. We can now teach our kids that they can stay here and work for anyone, which didn't used to be an option. So looking forward to that as well.
With some broadband.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We have a number of questions here, and what I'm going to do is maybe pull up 2 at a time and then pose them to different folks on our panel here. From Jim Ramsey, the question is, what role do you see student entrepreneurship and education playing in economic and workforce development for Vermont? Maybe Eileen and Ken, I'll start with you on that one. And then the second question is from Tracy Puffer, which is, most technical centers in Vermont also provide adult education courses and programs. What will the role of those programs be moving forward? That also sounds like an Eileen question potentially. And also, are there any opportunities for paralegal apprenticeships in Vermont? There is a need for paralegals who can help a lot of people here navigating the legal system. So maybe I'll pose all of those to all of you, and then if we can just go through, and if you want to answer a couple at a time, that would be great. So actually, Carolyn, why don't we start with you? We're going to do it that way.
Great. I will tackle the first question in a small way, which is, I'm so glad someone brought up entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking as a part of this conversation. In so many cases, entrepreneurship as an occupation doesn't necessarily make a list of most promising jobs, but it's an important part of the story, not only because entrepreneurship programs and maker spaces at a local and regional level are some of the brightest examples of regional partnerships and collaborations between providers and institutions, but also because a lot of the jobs and occupations we are talking about today, I'm thinking of bookkeepers, electricians, plumbers, often lead to small business ownership. And that's a form of entrepreneurship we don't often talk about.
I'm also going to add one more question to you before going to Joyce, and I know there's a lot here, but I'll just ask you to touch on any that you feel prepared to touch on or I'd like to. Is there outreach to the New American community for apprenticeships as well? Joyce, over to you.
So I will take that question first, because the New American population is very near and dear to our heart, particularly in the Chittenden County area. If I would love, in a non-pandemic environment, I would invite anyone to walk through the CCD building that is actually in my picture, because we have more than 20% of our students that are enrolled there. We have about 2,000 students there that are New Americans. So we do a lot with refugee resettlement. We really feel like this is a population that oftentimes seeks us out, and oftentimes it's 2 or 3 generations. Any opportunities that we can provide to them around apprenticeships, earn while you learn, internships. Most of the programs at CCD require an internship. And the reason for all of those is really helping them build connections, building connections with an employer. Because I will tell you that I think one of our most successful career development opportunities are internships. Because when you have to be in with an employer, all of a sudden they find, oh my gosh, we want to hire you. So yes, we try to make as many of those opportunities available to all Vermonters, New Americans, veterans, people who are looking to enter the workforce for the first time, or people who are looking to change careers.
And if I may, Joyce, what about paralegals? Is that something that CCV is providing training?
That's a really good question. We have run paralegal programs before. I have to tell you, one of the things that's hard for us is oftentimes we see a need, but there's no interest from the public. And a lot of people who become paralegals come at that route, not from a paralegal program, but they come at it from, they have a degree in history or they have a degree in writing. So we have struggled with, we would be happy to run a paralegal program, but when we have offered it, we have not been able to get the volume that's needed. And what happens is a lot of paralegals are hired, not with a paralegal certificate, but because they have a strong education background.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to next move to Eileen. And Eileen, again, the questions here are both about adult education courses and programs that are available, about recruitment and outreach to the new American community and apprenticeships. And then anything on entrepreneurship and education and economic and workforce development.
Okay, so I'll start with the entrepreneurship. I think that was the first question. So all career and technical education programs have proficiencies, but we have long had competencies that were, the technical skills. And as part of each one of those programs, entrepreneurship is a large part of that. We teach students what it's like to own a business going into their field and work in a business. Another part of that is at the North Country Career Center, we do professional portfolios. Each student has a portfolio where they actually talk about what business they would go into. They do some cost analysis of starting a business, as well as they document all of their technical skills in there. And work-based learning also, gives them an opportunity to see what it's like to work in a business, to own a business. We also do some internships. So that's that one. Adult technical education, I think, is it Tracy, put the webpage in. I would recommend that everyone goes to that webpage. It talks about all the different adult technical education programs that are available at the regional centers. And I have to say, for those of you that know me, you've been hearing me rant about this for a million years because I started in career and technical education doing adult technical education. I think it is the foundation of an adult workforce education and training system. I think it is underfunded and underutilized, and I hope that it goes just up, 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 because it really, we do stackable credentials, we partner with CCV, and we are able to turn things around very quickly. An employer can call and say, I need a X, Y, and Z training next week, and we can usually put it together. So I really think that that's important. The next question, new Americans. We don't have a lot of new Americans in this area, but I know down around the Chittenden County area that, they are doing technical programs and they're really reaching out to the new American community for reskilling, upskilling. There was one more question and I can't remember what it was.
Paralegals.
Oh, paralegals. I think it said something about an apprenticeship for paralegals. And just so people know, registered apprenticeship programs are run through the Department of Labor. There actually was a list of, 200 and something apprenticeships on the books. And I know that through work on the Workforce Development Board, we were trying to have a subcommittee pare down that list to really viable programs that are running. I think that Department of Labor would be a good place to start with that. As Joyce said, there's not always an interest in it, and we'll just see what comes up.
Thank you. Ken, over to you. And then Adam, we're going to give you the last word on the number of questions that have come up today.
Thank you. I'll just speak to a couple of them. One thing about entrepreneurship is that actually Vermont ranks really high in the country for the number of startups, top 3 as of a few years ago, but very, very low in scaling. So that's something I think we should look at. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't encourage entrepreneurial thinking, as Carolyn said. I think every company, every employer benefits from somebody who thinks about how something could be done differently. Because entrepreneurship, a lot of times it's thought about as, the next shiny object. That's really not what it should be. It's really about fulfilling needs. And that covers a whole lot more than just mass producing trinkets. So I think I'll just stop with that.
I like that. It's about problem solving, and we need a lot of innovation and problem solving now. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, great. Last week, a couple of folks from my team joined a call with CCV to learn more about their new cloud-based curriculum and certificates. And we're really fascinated by this in that it does provide access to careers that, as one of my colleagues always said, we can have kids who want to grow up to be anything in the world, but they can't necessarily be employed in Windham County. So if you want to be an astronaut, you're not going to be working in Windham County. That may still be the case, but if they want to now have a job that is remote, we flipped this whole working remotely thing on its head. We're not bringing people to Vermont. We're keeping our youth here and enabling them to work elsewhere. So through that program, with some of those certificate programs, with a quick time in the school, they can really start to get those early skills to be able to get those jobs, start to build on those, and eventually become an entrepreneur right here, or continue to work for someone else, or of course, work for a neighboring company based out of Vermont. So that was really exciting. We're looking to increase the digital literacy of our region, and excited to see that happening.
It's incredibly exciting. I hate that we are at an hour. We promised to keep these to an hour. I want to say a couple of things as we wrap up. First, workforce development is extremely important to me, to my office. It's the reason I decided to run for office and helping to solve our demographic crisis. So I sincerely mean it when I say that this today, I hope, is a first conversation of many, many to come with all of you here, whether we got to your question or not, or you're just joining us for the first time. Please be in touch. Once COVID lifts, I do hope to get around the state to see you, to engage, to really think through how we amplify some of the important work that's happening, how we think about the system rather than individualized programs, and really about the future of Vermont, which is innovative and resilient and diverse and exciting, and we have so much to offer. I also just want to make sure everyone knows that the YouTube from this event will be available, that you can reach out to us as well. Hazel Brewster is my chief of staff. You can feel welcome to email us and continue the conversation there. And I just want to thank everyone who's been working in the education and career and technical space over the last year for all that you've done during an incredibly challenging time. I thank you. I know the governor thanks you, and there's so much work to do. So I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sorry we didn't get to every question, but again, this is just the first conversation of many more to come. Thank you, and have a terrific rest of your week. Thank you for joining us.